Offensive possession.
Will he get the assist? He will! Triple-double, number 41 for Russell Westbrook. He has matched Oscar Robertson for the most all-time in a single season.
Unbelievable. Hey, welcome to SI Now. It's Wednesday, April 5th. I'm Maggie Gray. Jordan Schultz is with me for the rest of the week, and NBA writer Rohan Nadkarni is here. Let's talk some basketball, shall we? It's 7 straight and 41 for the season. That's where Russell Westbrook's triple-double count stands. Westbrook can break Big O's record for triple-doubles tonight. Got us thinking about some of the best individual seasons in NBA history. Let's run through a couple of them. Of course, it starts with the Big O, and that season averaging almost 31 points per game. Did not win the MVP that year. That will come into play later on in our conversation. Of course, then it goes to Wilt Chamberlain. I mean, guys, averages 50 points. And let's not forget the nearly 26 rebounds he averaged back in that 61-62 season. Also did not win the MVP. That was Bill Russell. Magic Johnson. I mean, look at that sweet stat line. When you're averaging almost 10 assists per game, along with almost 10 rebounds, he did not win the MVP that year either. We continue on to his heiress, Michael Jordan. Well, Magic won the MVP that year. That Michael Jordan averaged nearly 33 points per game, 8 assists, 8 rebounds. And of course, then it brings us to Russell Westbrook and what he's doing this season and averaging a triple-double. Okay, so Rohan, where would you put Westbrook's accomplishments among all these other phenomenal individual seasons?
So those are obviously all great seasons. I think, kind of judging them by the era everyone was playing in, I have to put Russ number 2 to MJ. I think what MJ did, not only offensively that season, but on the defensive end, he was just a menace early in his career, throughout his career really, but a great defender. Russ hasn't necessarily been that throughout this whole season, but, comparing him to Oscar Robertson, when the Big O played, he was playing a lot more minutes than Russ. The pace of the game was a lot different then. I mean, you can make an argument about Russell's usage rate, which is ridiculously high, but I just think, comparing all these seasons, what he's doing, considering his teammates, everything, Durant leaving, I put it as kind of maybe top 3, top 2 individual season of all time.
All right, Rohan, what needs to happen or what could happen for Harden or Westbrook to lock it up going forward?
That's such a tough question. I mean, it seems like every day, every hour, there's another reason to pick the other guy, right? I think if Russ really just, if he has another 50-point triple-double or something like that, I do think there's going to be some recency bias in this vote, ultimately. It's going to be so hard for voters to decide between the two of them. Russ's last week or so has been so incredible that I think the push is for him as MVP again. So I think if he, finishes out the seasons with triple-doubles in almost every game, if he shatters Oscar Robertson's record, then I think that he has a very good chance.
So here, I did a little digging, Maggie.
Okay.
And I'm prone to doing this and being a nerd with stats. So there's been 63 MVPs all time. 60 of them have been in the top 3 in terms of seeding in their respective conferences. So Westbrook...
It matters.
It does matter.
Yeah.
And whether or not you think it does, you look at the stats, it's almost impossible to think Westbrook's going to win this award then, even if you believe he should, because Harden is going to end up 3rd in the conference in terms of Houston. Westbrook's going to, at best, be 5 with Oklahoma City, which means James Harden.
It's definitely, again, and I think a lot of voters will use that reasoning. Ultimately,
Right.
They'll say, Harden led the Rockets to a better record. One thing that I think works for us is, when Oscar Robertson posted his triple-double, the league was still in such a young place. I mean, for all people knew then it was going to happen all the time. And I think you see now, you realize how rare of an accomplishment this is. I have gone back and forth on this personally so many times this season, but just seeing what's out there right now, I think people are so enamored with what he's doing and
incredible.
This accomplishment, the enormity of it, that I think he's going to win.
You do think he's going to win. See, I think that if James Harden wins purely because his team is 3 seeds higher than Russell Westbrook's, I think that's a huge mistake, because it's not like the Thunder are cashing out and not even making the NBA playoffs. It's not like they went into tank mode and Russell is now just putting up these unbelievable numbers because there's literally nothing else on the line or they're trying to lose, quote unquote. I think the fact that they're making the playoffs in the Western Conference, I mean, this is a huge feat, and we've seen the percentage rates that 80% of the time that Russell Westbrook has a triple-double, the team wins. Like, they literally need him to be putting up these kinds of numbers to have a shot.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And both teams have maxed out. I think the Rockets are definitely playing above expectations. But the Thunder, I mean, to go through what they went through, losing Kevin Durant, I mean, you could have told me this team would win 30 games and you'd probably believe it. I mean, there was no just kind of baseline to know what to expect from this team, and Russ kind of lifted them up.
Traded Ibaka.
Yeah. They kind of went to heights that I don't think anyone really, really, truly could have imagined. So they both maxed out, but I agree with you that if it comes down to seeding, I mean, what more could Russ have done for Oklahoma City? So I still don't know who I would pick if I had to pick today, but I just think the tide is turning in Russ's favor this week, but there's 1 week left. So
I think you're right. I think it is going to be like the recency bias, like literally the last game or two could decide this award. Let's turn over to the Eastern Conference. Of course, we have Cavaliers and Celtics playing tonight. We get some last-minute news. Tristan Thompson did not make the trip to Boston because he's getting an MRI on his thumb. Now, Boston has a chance tonight to even the season series with the Cavaliers. If they win this game, Rohan, do they now become a legitimate contender to take out the Cavaliers in the playoffs if the two teams meet?
I think so, and I think Boston's been a legitimate contender. I mean, from the beginning of the season when they added Al Horford, you know, they've had the pieces in place. This is the issue with the Cavs, and what makes it so hard to talk about them is every year since LeBron has gone back to Cleveland, they've had one of these periods where you just question, can this team win a championship? I think the difference being this year, their defense is truly bad. It's a bad defense. It's an awful defense. There's no covering that up, and I think that gives Boston a better shot more than seeding, frankly. You know, you saw LeBron his last couple years with the Heat, or last year rather, the Pacers had home court advantage. It didn't matter. So I don't think, you know, they beat Golden State in Oakland in a Game 7. So I'm less concerned about, frankly, the home court advantage than Cleveland's defense, but Boston's definitely a legitimate threat. You can't count them out.
Cleveland is 19-19 on the road this season. I would make the argument even still that the home court advantage is more important for the Celtics than Cleveland. They haven't been there. They haven't even been to a finals. I feel like they would really need it more so than Cleveland.
Yeah, without a doubt. I do think it's more important for Boston. And I think the biggest thing working in Cleveland's favor right now is you look at every NBA champion this decade, those group of guys usually kind of had to go through the gauntlet at least once and experience a loss before they really push through. And, you know, this Boston team, it's young and they're great, but this group hasn't really had a deep playoff run together yet, and I think that means something. It means something that they haven't been in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I do think that Boston, you know, they need the home court advantage more just because they haven't had that experience.
Yeah. So the Warriors, 12-game winning streak.
Amazing.
They've been hot, and everybody knows no KD. You saw him last night wearing the T-shirt and the blazer. It looked like he's getting ready. If he comes back or when he comes back, are we to assume that it will affect Golden State negatively at all? Because the metrics show that Golden State is significantly better with him defensively off the floor. And also Curry's numbers from an efficiency standpoint and a usage standpoint are better.
It's definitely very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone really expected the Warriors' defense to improve once KD went down. And obviously, you know, you're working with kind of small sample sizes here. We had the 12-game winning streak, but the 5 games before then, you know, the Warriors didn't look great at all.
No.
I think that obviously adding Kevin Durant will help. Ultimately, you know, the style of play the Warriors are playing right now is so much more aesthetically pleasing. I mean, they look like they did last year.
Yeah.
You know, everything was free-flowing. The ball is moving more. You know, when Kevin Durant's on the court, there are certain actions and plays you kind of have to run to get him going. Having said that, when he was on the court, their offense was better.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I mean, adding someone like Kevin Durant, who's not just a great basketball player, but a high IQ basketball player, I don't think it's going to hurt them in the long run. I think we're looking at some early 2000s Lakers potential with the Warriors in the playoffs right now. I'm expecting them to thoroughly steamroll opponents.
I'm just wondering if what this has proven is that the Warriors would be the favorites to win the title with or without Kevin Durant.
So.
I think, I mean, that's really what it seems like to me. It also seems like, you know, and this is just armchair psychiatrist, sort of body language expert, Steph Curry just seems loose. I mean, maybe it just took having the ball a little bit more in his hands and more of the offense running through him to get as comfortable as he appeared to be last season. And now he's ready to roll, and
you lose
Durant
some of
can
that
come in.
when Kevin Durant comes back. They say that with they want 350 passes a game. The Warriors say that. With Durant, there's less passes.
Sure.
So I do wonder about that. But to your point, how can you get worse with Kevin Durant coming back?
Yeah, I do think that there's something to be said about they just look a little bit more like themselves without Durant on the court. But maybe this works in their favor that now Durant realizes that he has to change his game. I think, you know, the first however many games of the season, you looked at the team kind of deferring to him, you know, changing the way they played.
Trying to get him comfortable.
Exactly.
Overcompensating, maybe.
And I think, yeah, exactly. I think they definitely overcompensated a little bit. And I think now maybe the onus will be on Durant to kind of make himself fit in more and kind of, meld his style with what the Warriors want to do.
All right, we're going to keep our eye on that. Rohan Nadkarni,
Thanks,
really
Rohan.
appreciate you. Thank you so much. Guys, I don't know if you heard, but Tony Romo retired. Newsflash, people care about this a lot. But how should fans ultimately remember the former Cowboys quarterback? Here's Peter King on Romo's legacy.
The way Tony Romo should be remembered by Dallas fans, and I think by fans of the entire NFL, is a guy who basically made the absolute most of his opportunity, was one of the best, not only quarterbacks from the pocket, but one of the best quarterbacks throwing on the run and throwing medium and long distance. And I think that is the one thing. When you see some quarterbacks right now, you see them, they sort of live in the intermediate areas of the field. And you don't see them throwing the ball deep very much. I mean, Romo was proficient, short, intermediate, and deep. I think that's number one. But I also think that he was a very good quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys because of who the Cowboys are. When you are the quarterback of the Cowboys, you have to handle a whole lot of other things. I think Romo did extremely well doing that. And everybody will say, well, listen, he wasn't great in January, but I don't think that should disqualify him from being one of the great quarterbacks of his day.
If you're looking for NHL players at the 2018 Olympics in South Korea, you are out of luck. It will literally be amateur hour at next winter's games, with the NHL announcing that the majority of clubs are, quote unquote, adamantly opposed to disrupting the season. This is not sitting well with the players. The NHL Players Association fired back, saying, quote, the players are extraordinarily disappointed and adamantly disagree with the NHL's short-sighted decision to not continue our participation in the Olympics. Any sort of inconvenience the Olympics may cause to next season's schedule is a small price to pay compared to the opportunity to showcase our game and our greatest players on this enormous international stage. Let's get the thoughts of an Olympic legend. Mike Eruzione was the captain of the men's hockey team in 1980. That was the Miracle on Ice team. Now he's the director of special outreach at Boston University. Mike, it's an honor to speak with you. What do you think of the new rule banning NHL players from the 2018 Olympics?
Well, and this might sound crazy, but I wasn't very happy with it. I saw how frustrated these guys are and how disappointed they are. And the bottom line is they take a great, deal of pride, when they have an opportunity to compete representing their country on the largest stage. So it is a little frustrating that these guys aren't going to get that opportunity that some of them have already experienced, but some have dreamed about having the opportunity to do.
Mike, considering the experience you had in 1980, what it meant to you, what it meant to the country, if Gary Bettman had come to you and asked for your advice, what would you have said?
I would have said, go play. I think it's a great opportunity to showcase the skill level of the talent of so many players all across the world, not just, Team USA or Team Canada. So many great players that are playing in the National Hockey League now, representing their country. Ovechkin has already made a comment about it. Henrik Lundqvist said it was an honor to represent Sweden in the Olympic Games and how disappointed he was. So I feel bad for the players. They're not going to get an opportunity to do something that's pretty special in your life. But I've said many times, when you put a jersey across that says USA, it's pretty special to be a part of that. And unfortunately, these guys aren't going to get to do something that they really feel strongly about.
Mike, we know what it meant to you. You were an amateur. Amateurs were made up that 1980 Olympic hockey team. So people may be a little surprised to hear you supporting the NHLers. What will it mean now to this group of amateurs, the college players, those lower tier players, now that they get a chance to compete in the Olympics?
Well, I think there's two things you got to think about. First of all, in 1980, there were maybe only one or two Americans playing in the National Hockey League. So I think we were the best players available at the time. The only other country that was an amateur country was the Canadians. All the European countries were professionals. So we played in an era that was very, very different than today. And when they allowed the pros into the Olympic Games, I was curious how they were going to play. Are they going to go after each other knowing they got an NHL season coming up and I was blown away by how competitive and how intense the games were. So I kind of changed my tune, having watched the NHL players and showcase their skill level and see how far the game of hockey has come. The game of hockey today is so different than it was in 1980. The influx of the Europeans, they're so much better. The skill level is so much better. Our depth chart in the United States is a lot bigger than it ever was. So it really is a different thing. And we're never going to see 1980 again. It's not going to happen. Regardless of the hockey victory, it was more than a hockey game in 1980. It meant more to a country from somewhat of a political standpoint than it did as a hockey game. So it's very, very different today than it was 38 years ago.
Mike, you touched on Alex Ovechkin. Obviously, he's been very defiant. He says he's playing for Russia regardless in 2018, doesn't care about the consequences. If you put yourself in his shoes, obviously a big-time star, would you insist on playing even if it resulted in a fine or a serious suspension?
I don't think he cares. And I've never met him, but I know he's very strong in his convictions about going over. I know he said it before when they talked about maybe not going to Sochi. So, if Ovechkin says he's not going, I don't believe he'll go, whatever the consequences might be. He'll just maybe say, okay, then I'll turn pro and go back and play up in the KHL league. So it'll be interesting if players follow Ovechkin. And I'm not just saying, the Russian players, any of the Swedish players, the Finnish players, the U.S. players, the Canadian players. It's going to be real interesting to see what happens when push comes to shove down the road. But also, you talked earlier, Maggie, I think you talked about the amateurs playing. I think the United States and USA Hockey has already got something in place. And I don't think it's just going to be college players. I think they're going to get some of the professional players who are playing overseas, some of the minor league players who might have their contracts have ended, maybe an ex-NHL player who just recently retired that's still can play a little. So you're not going to see what we saw again in 1980 where a bunch of college players are going to be on this team. They're going to get a handful of pros who are available, and there's a lot of Americans playing overseas who would probably be on this roster if it doesn't come to fruition again that the pros don't play. But I'm still not convinced that this is over. I still think there's still a chance.
You do think there's a chance. Okay. Who do you think will give in? Will it be the NHL, or will it have to be the players who would have to make some concessions to allow the clubs to release them from their contracts to go play in the Olympics?
Well, like any negotiations, I think both people have to give in a little. I think the IOC has to go in and give in a little. I think, obviously, the NHL, the Players Association, the Ice Hockey Federation. I mean, if everybody wants this to happen, and it seems like three of the groups do and one doesn't, they all have to give in a little to make this work.
Very interesting. We're going to keep our eyes on this story for sure. But Mike, just switching gears for a second, want to get your thoughts on another story going on in sports right now. The Mississippi State women's basketball team, they snapped UConn's 110-game winning streak, but they did not win the NCAA title. Now, some have compared this to your 1980 team, how you beat the Soviets, and then you went on to beat Finland in the gold medal game and won. Was it just as important to win the gold as it was to beat the Soviets in 1980?
Well, if you don't win the gold, you don't win the tournament, and that's why you go to the tournament, is to win the tournament. So if we had lost to Finland and not won a gold medal, who really cares about the Soviet victory? And there was a chance, people don't know this, that if we lost to Finland, we could have come in fourth place and not even won a medal. So as great as the Soviet victory was, the Finnish victory was greater for us as a team because we accomplished everything we had worked for and sacrificed, and it had come to fruition. But, I mean, the UConn season and what Gino's done down there is absolutely mind-boggling. But I still think it's a little different comparison to us beating the Soviets. I've always said if a group of college women basketball all-stars beat the NBA all-stars, that might be somewhat of a comparison. But what Mississippi State did was incredible. But I'm sure they're very, very disappointed that they didn't win the ultimate prize.
Yeah, listen, no one would know better than Mike Eruzione, the former captain of the men's hockey team. It is such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for your perspective, Mike.
All right, thank you for having me. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.
Bye now.
All right, Jordan, do you agree? I mean, listen, Mike's a legend. I'm not going to disagree with him. But
I'm surprised.
Do you think it's better to beat Goliath and snap that streak, even if it means you don't win the title?
I think in 1980, with the Cold War, to beat the Soviets, who were far and away the #1 team in the world, and had destroyed the USA in every pre-up, every exhibition game at the Garden, it's hard. I'm actually surprised. But to win the gold medal, and I didn't know that either, that if they had lost to Finland, that they actually not only could have finished second, they could have finished fourth without a medal, which is shocking to me. But to get a gold medal is remarkable. For Mississippi State, to beat them, to beat UConn and end that streak, and then to lose to South Carolina is just heartbreaking because you don't get a medal in the NCAA tournament. It's just one ring, that's it. How about you?
You know, so obviously it's not apples to apples. We are not calling the UConn women's basketball team the Soviets. That's not what we're intending to do here. But there are a little bit of a parallel, and this I will respectfully disagree with Mike Eruzione, very respectfully, because I know that there are people who are right now were not born in 1980 or don't remember, firsthand the Americans beating the Soviets, and most people think that was the gold medal game. Very few remember that the team had to go on and beat Finland to get that gold. So in a lot of ways, I think either breaking the streak or beating Goliath, I think that's what people remember, and the outcome is almost secondary.
Yeah, I hear you. I think, the emotional letdown almost to like for Mississippi State to beat UConn and then lose is incredible because it's really hard to get up again for another game after you make that happen.
I just hope that all the people out there say it doesn't matter if they don't win the championship. They better remember it was South Carolina who won the title in 2017. I want that to be a Jeopardy question or something. All right, that's going to do it for this Wednesday edition of SI Now. Jordan and I will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. But until then, keep up with the latest sports news with SI.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. We'll see you tomorrow. Great job today.